Welcome to the Global WarWatch Network. Let's get right into it. So let's start with something you probably didn't see coming. A major Turkish defense company is now making ammunition in Mongolia. I mean, that's not exactly next door. It's a really bold move, and it tells you a whole lot about a huge shift that's happening right now in the global arms race. And that really brings us to the big question for today's explainer. You see, for decades, Turkey was just a customer, a nation buying its military gear from others. But now? Now, it's a serious competitor selling its own advanced weapons all over the world. So how in the world did that happen? Let's unpack it. Okay, first up, a new power player. Before we look back, we really need to understand where Turkey stands today. This is a story of how long-term ambition finally met its moment. If you've been following defense news at all, you know these. Drones like the famous Bayraktar TB2 and its bigger, meaner sibling, the Akinji, these have literally changed the face of modern war. And the key thing here is they aren't just fancy prototypes. These things are battle-proven, tested in the toughest conflicts from Syria to Ukraine. And because of that, countries are lining up to buy them. This is the end game of a very long, very deliberate strategy. But to get to the real start of the story, we've got to rewind the clock. Because this whole journey wasn't born out of a desire for profit. It started with a painful crisis that forced a hard lesson. So back in the 60s and 70s, the situation in Cyprus was a real flashpoint. The U.S. fired a warning shot in 64, telling Turkey not to use American weapons there. While in 74, Turkey went ahead anyway, and the consequences were severe. The U.S. slapped them with a complete arms embargo. Just think about that. Your entire military runs on American equipment, and suddenly the spare parts and supplies are cut off. It was a crippling blow. And this is the absolute core of it. For Turkish leaders, this wasn't just a supply chain problem. It was a deep shock. They felt completely abandoned by their most important NATO ally. The lesson was brutal but crystal clear. If you rely on another country for your weapons, you're also relying on their permission to act. And that moment, right there, was the catalyst for everything that came next. And so that's when it began. A long, slow, and incredibly deliberate mission to build a defense industry from pretty much nothing. It would take decades and a whole lot of political will. And wow, this picture just says it all, doesn't it? On the left, you've got an American-made F-100 fighter from the 60s, a symbol of that old dependency. And on the right, that's the KAAN, Turkey's very own super ambitious fifth-generation fighter jet. That's not just an upgrade, that's a leap from one reality to another. Now, this didn't just happen overnight. They were smart about it, using a two-step approach. Back in the 80s, the plan was basically learn by doing. They teamed up with Western companies to build things like F-16s right there in Turkey. It was a masterclass in technology transfer. Then, roll forward to the 2000s, and the focus shifted in a big way. The new motto was, build our own. Their Navy is a perfect example. The Milgem warship program wasn't just about popping out a few ships. It was about building a whole ecosystem. With every new corvette they built, more and more of the parts, the radar, the weapons, the engines, were made by Turkish companies. You're not just building a ship, you're building an entire industry from the ground up. Okay, so let's get to the payoff. All this hard work wasn't just about defending their own borders. It's turned into a major source of economic strength and, you guessed it, global influence. You know, the numbers here are pretty wild. Just look at this chart. In about 10 years, their defense exports have more than quadrupled, from around $1.3 billion to $5.5 billion in 2023. That is just explosive growth, and it's the direct result of that long-term strategy. And here's where you see the power dynamic has totally flipped. Nowadays, if a big foreign defense company wants to sell something in Turkey, they can't just show up with a catalog. They have to play by Ankara's rules. That means partnering with local firms and, get this, reinvesting up to 60% of the deal's value back into the Turkish economy. Turkey is calling the shots now. But, of course, a rise this fast doesn't come without some major challenges. This new power has created some really complex problems, pitting Turkey's ambitions against its oldest alliances. And nothing shows this better than the whole S-400 mess. It was a classic stuck between a rock and a hard place moment. On one side, being part of the F-35 fighter program meant deeper ties with NATO and billions for their industry, but on the other, they went ahead and bought the Russian S-400 air defense system. That decision got them kicked out of the F-35 program, hit with U.S. sanctions, and caused a huge rift with their allies. It was a very high-stakes gamble. And for all their success, true self-sufficiency is still a ways off. They've still got some key vulnerabilities. They still need to import critical parts, especially things like high-performance engines for their jets and drones. They're also fighting a brain drain, losing top engineers to jobs abroad, and their whole economic model now depends on them continuing to win big in the brutal global arms market. So this all leaves us with one final massive question. Turkey has successfully built itself into a real power, with more freedom to act than ever before. But as it continues to carve out its own path, the ultimate test is going to be this. Can it balance its own ambitions with its very complicated and sometimes conflicting alliances? And that's our breakdown of Turkey's defense industry evolution. If you found this useful, we'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button, share it with someone who might be interested, and of course, subscribe to the Global WarWatch Network. We'd love to hear what you think, so drop your thoughts in the comments section below, and come join the conversation on our social media channels. All the links for that are right there in the description. Thanks for your time, and we'll see you on the next one.